Okay, first off, I'm going to just put a disclaimer on here. Now, if what I observed from my little corner of the world, and I remember from almost 20 years ago, is wrong in for general, just disregard this video. Uh, and I'm trying to make a general point about something that I feel was done very right in this case. However, this is just my observation. I wasn't in this fandom that I'm talking about at the time, and this is about how I was introduced to it and how I saw a lot of people introduced to it, and how, at least from my observations, it became much bigger than it ever was before. So if it doesn't track for the whole country, or it doesn't line up with your general experience, I am sorry, but I think that this is an example of this being done right. Okay, when you're a fan of anything that's like a niche product and like caters to a subset of a subset, or a subset of pop culture, or a subset of pop culture, one of the important things is to keep your fandom going and keep it growing, and just keep it moving on so that products will continue to be produced as it goes on. This is a problem that American comic books are having right now. And right now, Japanese manga is eating them alive in their own market. All because the more kids are being introduced to manga at a young age than comic books. But this isn't about American comics or their problems. However, I do find this interesting, since when I was a kid and even into my teens, I had never heard the term manga. In fact, I don't think I knew anybody who had heard the term manga, and yet everybody had heard of, say, Spider-Man and Superman and Batman. So to me, it's very interesting watching this complete market shift. And comics done in black and white, that was a surefire sales killer to me. I mean, that caused me to lose all interest when I was a kid, and yet you have these black and white comics that aren't even called comics; they're called manga, and you have to learn to read, right to left instead of left to right, and it's overcome huge obstacles to become big. So, and you go, and every time I go out to, say, somewhere, when I have to go out in public to shop for something, I always see at least one person with a jacket with, say, an Attack on Titan logo on it, or something like that. I'm trying to remember if the Hunters have a special name in that. I haven't seen the full series yet, and I'm trying to remember. But whatever the symbol is for the guys who go out and hunt the giants who eat people. Yeah, spoiler alert for Attack on Titan. It's about giants who eat people and people who hunt them. But anyway, and you see their symbol on somebody's jacket out there, or a shirt or a T-shirt. I always see at least one person with that. And that was something and here's the thing. What's hard to believe, but you have to be my age to remember, is that when I was a kid, the first piece of, and the only piece of anime I had ever seen, and we didn't even call it anime back then. If Japanese animation was called anything, and if you saw it like on cable or somewhere, or on a local station somewhere, the most common term you would hear is Japanimation. If you look, there are several episodes of, say, Mystery Science Theater 3000 that are an artifact of that, where there will be a clip of anime in some movie they're watching, and somebody will make a comment about Japanimation. And yeah, anime just wasn't that big. I mean, Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon were out there, and they were part of the pop, and they were sort of part of pop culture, but they were a very small subset. And people like me, we were just put off. As a kid, I'd look at it, I'd just be like, what are these things? It was just too weird. It just went too weird. And the closest thing I saw to any, but the first thing I was exposed to was Robotech, and that's just an American corporation using Japanese footage to tell what is, in many parts, their own story, which is fine. I like both. I like the series that Robotech comes from, and I like Robotech. I know that there's some divide in the community, but to me, now seeing it as an adult, I can admire a lot of hard work. I can admire the Japanese original while also looking at just thinking about just how much hard work and long hours must have gone into trying to adapt these free series into something that would fit the format that they wanted on US television. And I can admire them for for the amount of effort and creativity I had to go into it, and just the long work hours that went into taking this footage and basically trying to do your own multi-generational story arc with it, which, let's face it, is still pretty ambitious. But here we are at like the 6 minute mark, and I'm still talking about an intro. Well, the point of this video is that think that there's a perfect example of how to bring new people into a fandom. And no fandom is harder to break into than manga and animation, because not only does it come from another country, but you have this completely different art style that was in its early days influenced by comics, by animated shorts from like the Fleischer Brothers, like Betty Boop, and comic strips from Europe and the United States, that many of which no longer appear in American newspapers. So you have all that, or printed in American comic books. So you have all those influences giving it a sort of weird look already. And then as I said, in the 90s, Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon existed, but those never broke into the mainstream. The moment I noticed that the first time I heard the term anime and saw it be used was to describe this new show on Cartoon Network that I didn't see in its original Cartoon Network run because I didn't have cable, but it was this show that had a weird name called Cowboy Bebop. And yeah, I didn't get it. I knew a lot of people who didn't get it. But come 2001, a movie came out. It didn't get a wide release, so you might ask why this is relevant. Well, its home video release on VHS and DVD made it into places like Walmart and places like that, and that's where I came across the DVD, and a friend of mine got it, and I saw the DVD of the movie. And I know a lot of people who started out with Cowboy Bebop, and it's been described, I've heard anime fans and articles describe it as a gateway anime. And boy, is it a gateway. It opens up, and I know people to this day who say that the only anime they can stand is Cowboy Bebop because it limits the over-the-topness of anime. Basically, you don't have a lot of the negative cliches, or just cliches that a lot of people think. There's no, I hope senpai notices me, or over the top stuff. The over the top animation, as far as it goes, is pretty much limited to Ed, and most of what Ed does still looks sort of physically possible, and she doesn't seem to be phasing into another dimension. So you have that. But this isn't a criticism of other anime, because I like a ton of anime. Here's the thing, is I know this may seem a bit of a controversial opinion, I know that, but here's my feeling. Anime and manga are just art styles and art forms. And like any art or storytelling medium, you're going to have a lot of corporate produced trash that's generic, and you're going to have a lot of art. And you're going to have some art that's good. I don't think the ratio is any different for that than it is for any other storytelling medium, such as Hollywood blockbusters or anything like that. So yeah, but as I said, a lot of people I know their intro to anime and manga was Cowboy Bebop, the movie. And after that got its home video release, and Adult Swim just kept playing this show, but wasn't very successful in Japan. That's why they had it, was because it was really, really cheap. For it was really cheap, the rights to it. And what's more, I think it helps that it had a really good dub. There weren't any whole sentences being crammed into a few mouth movements. So it had a really good translation and dub. That's another thing that I think helped Cowboy Bebop. But Cowboy Bebop, to me, the movie, its opening is the perfect example of how you introduce people to a new fandom that might get them interested in a new art form. And that is, it doesn't throw everything in the kitchen sink at you. Trouble I have with a lot of animated movies, both in the United States and in anime, is that that are based on existing properties, is that they tend to try and close off plot arcs or do something really big, and they tend to front load it. In fact, the first 20 minutes of most anime movies, I mean, even the DC animated movies that I like, they tend to front load with tons of explanation, especially the ones about the Justice League, or Marvel anime movies about the Avengers. They'll, like, the first 20 minutes will be nothing but a huge amount of people talking. It'll be like a wall. If it's a script, it's just a wall of text of people throwing exposition about the whole world and all the characters at you and all their special ability and trying to give you all the backstory. Cowboy Bebop the movie, the opening stops, keeps from making this mistake, and thus lets new fans in by just taking place between any two episodes. I mean, I know fans say that it goes between episodes 22 and 23. That's where I tend to watch it. But the fact is, it works between any episodes after Ed is found. But it's a great intro, too. If you intro this like I did, and like I and so many other friends did, because here's the thing. It was our intro because it was at Walmart. You didn't have to go to a specialty video store and pick this thing up that was in a weird case that cost you $25, 25 to $30 because it was dubbed, and that costs a lot of money, and had like 4 or 5 episodes on it. That's how Cowboy Bebop and all anime was released at that point on DVD or VHS. You just found it in Walmart, and it was like 10 to $15, and it was a movie, a self-contained movie. But here's how the intro works to this movie. I'm not going to put a clip of it up here. This would work so much better if YouTube wouldn't automatically block in all countries every single video I put up with a clip demonstrating what I'm talking about. I'm trying to promote this movie and tell you why you should get it or give it a try if you haven't. And why, even if you don't like anime, you probably like this movie, but that's not good enough for the rights holders. Anyway, but my gripes aside, here's how this perfect intro works. You immediately know, because of the look of the thing, that this takes place in the not too distant future. There are still convenience stores, and there's a guy just basically holding up a convenience store. Okay, you then see this big guy who has this gruff voice, and immediately, from the way he talks, you get it. This uses the world to fill you in on the backstory, and it trusts you to fill in parts of it, and it doesn't overwhelm you. It just lets the storytelling show you what's going on. And from the beginning, you get that our main characters are this older gruff guy who is a more professional and just more by the book, and we got a younger hero who is there, who's sort of a hero, but we get that they're hard luck, rough, 1940s, 1970s, sort of, from the way that they talk, we're just filled in on that. We figure out that it's not too distant future. We don't need a caption telling us the exact year or anything like that. That's not important. All that we need to know is that we're somewhere in the not too distant future at a convenience store. These people seem human. They're talking in a very human way, and you have this clerk who's being held hostage to give some humanity and give us some emotional stake in this. And then as they stop the robbers at the convenience store, you get that our people are some are, somehow involved in crime stopping, but you don't get the feeling that they're cops from the way that they act, especially how Spike acts. And throughout this brief action scene, we learn tons about them. I mean, just look, we see Jet using more typical police tactics and gathering intelligence and coming in through an air vent. Spike, we see distract a guy and then kick him in the face, so we get that he probably knows some form of martial art. We then see him use distraction and sleight of hand to fool another guy. So we see that he's a master of sleight of hand. We see him again uses flexibility of martial arts skills. So we see that he's very quick on his feet. We see that he's a very flippant character who lives by his wits, and that, but he doesn't think too far ahead. We then see, and then we get to the end where the old lady is being held hostage, and we see the difference between how Spike and Jet handle a problem. Jet, and this is confirmed later in the movie, acts like a typical cop. The guy the hold-up guy takes the old lady hostage, and Jet, drops his gun slowly on the ground, like you've seen in everything else. But Spike just aims for the guy's shoulder. And then he clarifies for us exactly what's going on. And we know it, and he points out that they don't work for charity. And at that we know that there's money involved. If you're like me, you know that money's involved. And then he fires on the guy. And then he gets the guy mad. The guy makes the mistake of taking the gun off the old lady, and he then shoots the guy in the shoulder. And the guy calls him a cowboy. So if you're like me and somebody's told you that this is Cowboy Bebop the movie, and you're scratching your head like, what does that title mean? Well, the old lady even fills us in on that. But it's in a very natural dialogue way. It's like, maybe this old lady wouldn't know this slang term for bounty hunter. She asks him, what do you mean by that? And Spike, looking totally cool, gives us an intro to a really cool opening credit sequence that he just says, just a humble bounty hunter, ma'am. And it's a very Jim Rockford-esque type cool. You get it. After this, you get it. He and Jet, our two main heroes are two Jim Rockford-esque types in that they're working the private sector. They're doing something that involves the justice system, but they're working the private sector, and they're always hard up for cash. But Spike also has this flippant attitude, and to the corruption that gets him through the corruption and everything else in the world around him. And then you get this cool intro that sort of shows off the world and shows that, yes, it's not too distant future. Yes, this is a very urban environment. Lots of people being thrown together, and it's sort of like New York City on sort of like crack, and all this music is very important, and the type of music that'll make this feel cool. And to me, that is what got me into anime, and that is what got me into Cowboy Bebop. And then when I was collecting them and I started collecting them when I started collecting it on DVD after I saw this in the summer of 2002. The fall of 2002, actually, a year after its release, when my brother got a PlayStation 2 for his birthday, and that was my family's first DVD player. And yeah, I was hooked. And to me, and here's the thing, after that, I saw anime start exploding, in the years that followed, I saw anime start exploding, and every time, it always seemed to be Cowboy Bebop that was introducing people, and the people I talked to, a lot of them said they either found an episode on a random episode on Adult Swim, and usually it was an episode like this that didn't go into the metaphysics, really. There are plenty of non-metaphysic episodes that are just straightforward, catch the bad guys, and that helps. So anyway, and then it just helped bring it and make it more popular, and now it's at this point where more kids are reading manga than American comic books. Something that nobody would have thought because nobody knew what manga was when I was a kid. Most people didn't know what anime was or the term anime. So here's the bottom line, what Cowboy Bebop the movie did right, and what Cowboy Bebop in general did right. It doesn't overwhelm. I know when you introduce somebody new to something, it's tempting to just tell them everything and try to, but that is very off-putting for most people. It's off-putting for me being hammered with all this information. Instead, pick something that has enough in common with the real world and what you know they're interested in, that it's a gateway, and that the parts of it that veer off just look like a neat new way to tell a type of story that they understand. The stories in Cowboy Bebop are usually pretty straightforward if you understand sort of snatching bad guys and hard luck, heroes who are cowboys or private detective stories. So start with something like that and don't overwhelm them with information. Pick a story that's sort of straightforward and where the new stuff just feels like original new takes on something old and has a hook to it, like a character who instantly gets your attention, like Spike Spiegel, who throughout that whole thing, who throughout the whole intro hooks the viewers in. And that's what I would say. And that's what I think Cowboy Bebop did really great, and why I think that its 20th anniversary this year is kind of important, as it's still going strong. You still find it it's still streaming on Hulu, it's still for sale on home video, it's still out there, and I still meet people to this day who it's either the only anime they can stand, or they're like, oh yeah, Cowboy Bebop the movie, that was the thing that got that was the first anime I ever really watched. I mean, maybe I saw some reruns of Dragon Ball Z. If they weren't introduced through Dragon Ball Z, they seem to have been introduced through Cowboy Bebop, and Dragon Ball Z was limited because it's, peculiarities. But I think Cowboy Bebop did it right. So just do something straightforward. Don't think that it's important to explain the history of every character. Don't think you have to explain, like, where Ed and Faye come from. You just accept, if you're a viewer, you just accept that that there are other people who live on this ship with the two eras we were introduced to in the intro. So that would be my advice. Just something straightforward, something that is grounded, and then if they want to see more, they'll eventually branch off. That's how it worked for me, and that's how it worked for most of the people I know in my little corner of the world. Well, anyway, I hope you found this video interesting.